What is good, y'all? Welcome back to the show. My name is Nick Engvall, and today I have a special guest that I get to talk to about creating content strategy, storytelling. This is somebody that's made a huge impact on my life and a huge impact on the sneaker space, on music, streetwear, fashion. Like, this guy's done a lot of cool shit in his career, and I think that I consider him one of my best friends and one of the people that I'm most thankful to have met along my journey in the sneaker world. So he's worked for companies like Complex, Finish Line, Guess. The company that he's working for now is doing some really cool shit, helping underserved communities start their businesses and really grow their businesses. I'm super excited about talking to him about those things. I get to learn a lot about that world in this conversation with him, but I also get to reminisce about the good old days, even though today's days are really good as well. We get to talk about some of the things that have changed over the years in the sneaker space, and it's just a really great conversation. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Brandon Edler. And if you get a chance, leave me a comment, leave a review. Let me know what you think about these interviews. I would really appreciate that. And thank you always for listening and supporting. Here we go. Here's the show. What is good, man? Project Pat.
What's up? What's up? 3 mics.
I knew that I would be thrown back into a whole different era by just getting on here and chopping it up with you, because I figure you bring something that would trigger some thoughts for me. So
I was going to go with the throwback jersey, but I'm starting a new thing starting this Friday through the end of summer where I'm going to go throwback every Friday for the rest of the summer. And it just didn't feel appropriate since we're taping on a Wednesday. I didn't want to break the rules for it, but it got all these great throwback jerseys. Just because I'm 40 doesn't mean I can't rock them.
Nice. Yep. All right. So let's give people the quick rundown on who you are, what you do, and then we'll get into how we linked up and all the fun we've had together.
Absolutely. Brandon Edler. So right now I'm currently the head of content for a venture capital firm called Slauson & Co. For those that don't know what venture capital is, I didn't either when I first started. But essentially we're helping fund businesses at the earliest stage of where they are and really trying to help them get their dreams off the ground, their ideas off the ground. And our firm specifically, we really focus our missions on underrepresented founders, typically from Black and brown communities, primarily in business tech, small business tech, but definitely have other investment theses that we're open to as well. So you should check us out at Slauson & Co.
At Slauson & Co. on all the on the social platforms.
That's
right?
The handles. Yeah.
So Brandon and I met, a long ass time ago, man. 14 years ago, something like that. So we met, I guess technically we met before I even started really working at Complex, but kind of in that, like, everybody was trying to find freelance writing in the sneaker world era. How did you even link up with Complex, and how did you get started writing for Complex?
Yeah. I guess you could say I was a bit of a fanboy. So they had the issue, remember the double covers. It was Kanye and Cassie, and it was when Kanye was dropping Graduation. So he had like the shutter shade. I don't know if he had the shutter shade on the cover. I thought he did, but it was just like kind of in that Dior kind of flow, whatever, the Otto Matsumoto kicks and the whole nine. And Graduation Kanye is my favorite Kanye. So I remember seeing it at Barnes and Noble's, reading it. And if I'm not mistaken, it was either that issue or shortly after, like the letter to the editor was a bunch of Twitter conversations that like him and Jack and Joe and everybody were having with each other. So I was like, all right, let me follow all these guys. And the more that I followed them, the more I was like, this is amazing. I would love to be a part of it. And I had no writing experience. Honestly, like I try to get their attention on Twitter, wasn't making a whole lot of traction with it. And it was Ian Stonebrook, of all people, who him and I kind of connected on Twitter. And he just continued to like really encourage me to keep going. I'm sure he was sick of it at a certain point. I was just like, damn, it's not happening. And he's like, no, you're good. Keep going, keep doing it. And he was lived up in Michigan before he moved down to Austin. He stopped through Indy and just gave me like a really, really good pep talk. And I was like, you know what, I'm just going to do what I do, and hopefully I get noticed. And yeah, about a year and a half of kind of just like writing individually, like just posting stuff on my Facebook, Twitter. Um, Man, I can't even think, was it like Blogspot, whatever that was? Like I was like putting stuff on there. And then, yeah, Joe gave me a shot. I think he was like, all right, enough. You drove us crazy. Let's see what we can do.
I love that, man. I also love that Ian was part of that, because Ian, I gotta get in touch with Ian and catch up with him. I don't know if people realize that Ian is like, I mean, he's become the OG when it comes to sports writing and sneaker writing.
Yeah.
He actually, I met him when he moved from Michigan down to Austin, and he was the first person that interned. Like, we had a group of interns, and he was just like, basically it was all summer we just hooped and wrote about sneakers. You know, I feel like me and George Keel just always had the, like, pinch ourselves, because like, is this the dream? Like, I mean, yeah, we're not getting paid to hoop, but we're getting the same opportunities to like do this thing that we love. So yeah, it's pretty wild, man. And Complex back then was just such a different beast, you know, like,
yeah.
Do you remember what year you like first started contributing there?
2011. So I got a DM from NCB on New Year's Eve about like basically like kind of reaffirming like I'm getting the call up, and I was just like, how drunk are you? It's only like 4 in the afternoon. Like what is going on? And you know, just like really couldn't believe that I got that message. And then yeah, I want to say like my first article, like Joe kind of onboarded me the first like week or two of January, and I think my first article was published middle of January, and I remember it vividly. I mean, who doesn't remember their first? It was Jeremy Scott, camouflage wing, Adidas, and I remember like thinking I like killed it. It was only like 3 sentences, and Joe was like, "Yeah, you got a lot to learn. We got to like really sharpen your skills." But he was really encouraging, and he like worked through me. He's like, "You have the voice and tone. You just got to learn how to become a better writer," and he worked with me on a lot of that. And then obviously, you know, going into Russ being on staff, like shit, you got like the best of the best, really like helping you sharpen your skills.
Yeah, man, it's so crazy, because like that Twitter, man, like I miss that era of Twitter when it was fresh and everybody was just like, it felt like everybody was just like looking to connect and looking out for each other. And like, I don't think any social platform has that right now, but it's like, I came into Complex, maybe like a year after that, somewhere around there. Like, it wasn't.
Yeah, I think you're like summer of 2012 is where like we started connecting quite a bit. Because
I reposted at the time. I was just doing like freelance stuff. I had left Soul Collector, and Russ posted a job listing on Twitter and was like, if anybody's interested, let me know. And I retweeted it and basically said, hey, this is a dope job if anybody's in New York, because they wanted somebody in New York. And Russ DM'd me and was like, if you want it, it's yours. And I was like, do I got to move to New York? At that time, I wasn't
really
a
West Coaster, right?
Yeah. And I mean, at that time, I wasn't really mentally prepared to move to New York. But of course, like, you know, Complex was, I had already worked for Soul Collector. Complex was like the next level up in like the, you know, magazine world. So I just was like, yeah, I'll figure it out. And yeah, end up, I think probably within like a couple of weeks, ended up planning the move and all of that stuff. And I think it took like maybe a month and a half before I actually got out there, but I started working and writing really early on before I even left California for that. So such a cool time to be involved in this stuff, man. Like, there was just so, you know, I look back at some of the stuff that we all collectively wrote, and, you know, like we really kind of defined what the internet talked about on a lot of many days. Like, we defined what social media platforms were talking about on that day, you know?
Absolutely. That was probably my favorite. Yeah, that was probably my favorite part of it, is like you drop something, jump on Twitter and just see like the conversation. Like, you know, obviously you had the folks that didn't agree with anything that you wrote and basically said you were an idiot. But then there was a lot of people that like really jumped in, had a good time with it. I think, you know, I really focused on features after my first couple of months. Like, Joe really gave me the keys. Like, I'd pitch him 4 or 5 ideas every week and might publish like 3 or 4 of them every single week. And, you know, stuff from complete sneaker history of Wayans Brothers, Fresh Prince, all that, which was started by Gary doing the Seinfeld episode, rest in peace. Or he did the Seinfeld one, which was, you know, such an amazing thing, and had the foresight to be like, I'm never doing that again. It's a pain in the ass. And it really was a ton of research. But then just like every single list, like top 90 sneakers of 90s, working on that as a team, like all that to say, like 12, 13 years later from some of those being published, I'll be in an Uber out here in LA and, you know, strike up conversation. What do you do? Like blah, 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 blah. And if Complex comes up kind of in the path of the conversation, oh man, I used to read Complex sneakers all the time, blah, blah, blah. Like,
yeah.
Content, whatever, or like whatever feature. And I was like, yeah, I wrote that. Like, it's just kind of cool to be able to be like, yeah, like I feel like it happens pretty frequently.
Yeah, definitely, man. It was kind of just a, you know, like a perfect storm of everything for all of that. You know, like we kind of started off running, not knowing where it was all going. And like, I remember like, I actually signed up for Complex Sneakers Instagram and Twitter accounts to break them out because we only had the one handle when I started. And I was getting frustrated because, you know, like a month or so into being there, it was like I kind of took over the channel or the sneaker content and was like, you were kind of my right-hand man. Russ was like my right-hand man as well. But like, it was such a, you know, like we were trying to do like long form stuff with Russ all the time. So it was like, we were trying to have him do the print stuff. And it was funny because I remember signing up, like that's like the main thing that I remember in like that first couple of months was like just getting frustrated and being like, yo, I got to have a way to put this out for just people that care about sneakers. Cause if you can imagine, like if you've never worked in like a big kind of media house company type situation, you've got like style, music, art, all these different genres and categories that you're trying to push out. But if you only have the one handle, then like everybody's fighting to get their featured story out there. So that was a big learning experience for me. But going back a little bit, right to your point about like, you know, the learning curve of all that stuff, the first like big feature that I had after I'd started writing a few things, you know, remotely before I made the move. And then I wrote a little bit about like moving sneakers across the country because I moved like a good portion of my collection and stuff. But the first major feature, talking about learning what you don't want to do, I did the top 100 or the best 100 Air Force Ones. And I was like, nah, man, this is not, I'm not trying to go, because everybody's got an opinion about that stuff, man. But I do miss that kind of back and forth that we used to get on social from it, you know?
Oh, that was the best. I had my tweet deck set up and it was like open all day because I didn't work at Complex. A lot of people don't realize that. Like I had a full-time job and almost a second full-time job doing Complex. So I'd be at work, you know, we usually published at 10 a.m. Eastern, like that was the goal. And then I would just have it lined up. Like I would search for whatever the article like title was and then just look in TweetDeck. Like if they didn't add us, like I could still see what they'd said. And I was like hella thirsty. I used to like even hit folks back without them even saying anything and be like, oh yeah, thanks for checking it out. Whatever. I was like, if anything, it gets us like a follower or whatever. Like, but yeah, man, it was a lot. I remember the one that raised hell was I think we did like two that I vividly remember where it was like, you know, broke the internet, like not in the good way, like in the bad way, was the top 20 female sneakerheads. Lord, was that a day. And then the other one was I did the top 50 SB dunks with it was Seed of the JL. Remember him? He did the Goodwood pieces.
Oh, yeah,
Chris Lee.
Yeah, Chris. Yeah.
Him and I did that together, and I really didn't know a ton about SB dunks, and it shined through with that feature for sure. I mean, Russ came and cleaned it up as best he could, but yeah, those two people had a problem with them, and they had every right to.
Yeah, man. I mean, people had a problem no matter what you said, because I remember Russ and I talking about it, and we talked to you about it too. But I remember talking to Russ when I first got out there, and I was like, look, man, like the best thing we can do is make fun of ourselves with this stuff, because we're like, it's corny if you're a grown ass man like myself, 40 something years old, still worried about sneakers that are coming out every day. Like, I have no shame in saying that, like, if I looked at myself from the outside and didn't know like my career and my friends and all of the things that have happened because of sneakers, I'd be like, this motherfucker is crazy. Like, what the hell is this guy doing? Like, shouldn't you have like a couple of kids now? Like, you should be like, you know what I mean? Like, I get it.
Yeah.
But that was always the thing that I always tried to put into all of that stuff too. And what Russ and I kind of talked about is like, just saying like, yo, if you're taking this so seriously that you're offended by it, then like we're making fun of ourselves right now. Like,
Yeah.
like we're right there with you. If you're offended by it, it's kind of weird because we're the ones that are like nerding out about this. Like, how crazy is it to have, you know, like at times we would have half a dozen, even a dozen people debating on a list of just like whatever nuanced shoes, you know, like most of the people don't even know all the shoes on a list, let alone like, you know, and obviously sneakers has grown like crazy. So there are more people, and it's not just, you know, Nike Talk folks that, you know, I mean, that was a list that we did too, was like all the people from Nike Talk you needed to follow. And I remember people just all in my DMs just being like, how could you not include this person and that person?
Yeah.
And, you know, the way we approached it was like, well, we're going old school. Like, we're going like the roots of Nike Talk, not like whoever's like trending topic at that time.
Yeah.
And of course you can't satisfy everyone, because there's 1,000 people that are like, I'm famous on Nike Talk, put me on that list, you know? But yeah, man.
I think that was the like beauty and the struggle to all of it, is like, there's no rhyme or reason. Like, there's no perfect way to approach it. Like, even like you sit there and debate like the top Jordans of all time, like let's go 1 through 23. And I mean, just even within the office, like we're all pretty big, like sneaker purists and like have a deep understanding. It's like, if one of us, it's the 1, one of us, it's the 4, one of us is the 6. And like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just so subjective. And it's, I get it. You could never please everybody. I think that's what made it so provocative, and why so many folks shared it, is like, for as many people that really enjoyed it, a lot of people like to shit on it, and that's good content too.
Yeah, definitely, man. And I think that's the thing is, like, I don't think any of us would look at every list that we worked on and be like, yeah, that's exactly how I would say it. You know, because we all push and pull to get it to a point where we could at least say, all right, we're at like an 85% level with all of us, you know, like that. Yeah. That's where like everybody feels mostly good about it. Somebody's going to be like, nah, that shoe is definitely not in my top 10. But yeah, it was some crazy times, man. I think like that's kind of an interesting segue to more of the stuff that you're doing now. But like, just in general, like, how do you feel about social now? Because like, I feel like we had the best of it in that era where, you know, not only was like, if an emergency happened or like some breaking news happened, it was there for everyone right away. But also you could actually have like some pretty substantial conversation around things. And now it still happens, but I think so much of it has moved into like YouTube comments, Reddit, you know, like Discord groups. Like it's so different, where like Twitter always felt like the community, like gathering center, especially for sneakers and hip hop and, you know, sports and stuff that we're really passionate about. But do you think, I mean, you mentioned to me the other day about Reddit, and I'm on Reddit, but I am literally just a lurker on there. It's rare that I post, and I still look at it for news, but I don't engage with it the same way that I do other platforms.
Yeah. I'm not a poster either. I'm a lurker as well. But I think what I love about it is it's not really built on influence, meaning like the top comments aren't going to be the same person over and over because they got clout on there. It's just like, it feels like the best thought, or in Reddit's instance, probably the most sarcastic, witty thought is probably going to be the top thing that you see. But I like it that it just feels a little bit separated versus like, well, this person has 17 million followers, so whatever they say has got to be the gospel. And just the way that it's broken down by categories, it's so easy. Like for me, I've been heavily invested in this whole Fisker situation because I pre-ordered it, and we won't go down that whole rabbit hole because it's a whole sad situation. But it's like, all right, I can, you know, any given night in 30 minutes, I can get Fisker news, fantasy football news, world news, and whatever. And then I can go into a deep dive of Tim Robinson memes because I want to laugh or, whatever is going on there. And I feel like YouTube is the same way.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like you can get a lot more nuanced on those levels. And that's probably the two places where I do enjoy the most conversation. Whereas like, what you're saying, like Twitter back when we first got on there, like the whole reason I joined it was like live NBA tweeting. Like that was the thing we do. We'd watch whatever game was on ESPN or TNT. Yep. Everybody would live tweet about it, whatever. And then it turned into whatever sneaker drops happening at midnight. We're all sitting there seeing who got in, who caught an L, whatever. And then my favorite version of Twitter, which, man, I miss this so much. And I wish like artists would get back to it. Forget the streaming services, just drop the album at midnight. And then we would all listen to it in real time, like watch The Throne, like in real time.
Yeah.
My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy in real time. The way that media and content has changed so significantly, I think it's robbed us of a lot of those community moments because we're not all at the same time and pacing on a lot of that stuff. And I get, like Beyonce drops at midnight on Spotify, whatever. You could technically do it that way, but it just feels so different than it used to be. The one advantage I'd say of content now, though, is like the storytelling's gotten so much better. Like you see the woman who was on TikTok talking about the person that she married, like 50 episodes of it. Next thing you know, she gets hit by a talent agency to be, whatever. And that might be more predatory versus like her being really talented, so to speak. But like, whatever, she got a lot of people's attention and nowhere else. At no other time could you have done stuff like that. And just like when we were first coming up in social, it was just like really good, clean photography. Now it's about really good video and transitions. It's just a lot more entertaining. Like the level of production's got a lot better. It's just we're at the mercy of the owners of it, aka Meta and X, and it's just like, all right, I could create the greatest thing in the world, but 3% of the people that follow me are even going to see it, and going viral is next to impossible, and that's why a lot of people favor TikTok over anything else because the possibility of getting more visibility is a lot higher. But anyways, that's I guess my old man ran on all of it.
No, I mean I think it's really interesting because like you're kind of in a different place on the content side of things now where, people like even just what people think of when they think of content is so different than what I would have said 5, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Right. Like before it was like, oh, you're a writer, you're a content writer. Like you're doing blog posts day in, day out. Right. Like that was it. Right. And now it's evolved into like such nuanced stuff, kind of what you're saying, where, you've got to have like levels to everything, production levels, the value behind all of these things, the virality stuff. And I think that it's really kind of, I personally feel like it's like we're kind of at coming to a head with that stuff where I think there's going to be some changes in the way that these platforms like capture and work, like I can't remember if you and I raps about this, but the artificial intelligence stuff that's out there, right? Like the fact that they've had access to all these different platforms and all these people's work. And it sounds crazy to a lot of people to say that like your social content, your writing, your photos, all that stuff is work. But like a lot of people, that has been work since the internet started, kind of becoming the place where everybody went to. And now we've got all these companies that have like basically, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole too much, but like kind of stolen all of your knowledge and information and style and turned it into like a different beast. So I kind of think there's going to be like some push and pull in that world of things that's going to change the way that a lot of these platforms are able to like take our information and use it in other ways or sell it to other people. But I think what's interesting and what I kind of am curious where you think now, where you're more, and I'm assuming you're more like kind of more strategy behind the scenes versus like banging on the keyboard all day, knocking this stuff out. What is like your kind of like how do you think about the way people approach their content strategies now versus maybe in the past? Because like one of the things that we talked about that's interesting about the complex era is like like those listicles that we did back then just don't have a place to live now, and they're still good for a lot of reasons. They get people talking, but they have a very low ceiling compared to what they used to have.
Absolutely. I think from like a high level strategy standpoint, like what I'm focused on is just like really good storytelling with dynamic visuals. Everything's so video focused now, and it doesn't mean that there's not importance on writing. That I would love to see writing come back. I would maybe not list, but even just like 500, 800 word essays, a little bit more of that. I mean, I feel like Welty's always done a great job of that. He's always kind of championed that on the complex side and made sure that that continued to live on. But just yeah, I think like the short form video, making it look like it's highly produced, being able to create great stuff and the storytelling. And it's like, we've lived in this time where we've been, again, at the mercy of Meta specifically, where it's like, well, if you don't play our game, then your organic's going to take such a big hit, whatever. I'm not doing that. Like, I would rather treat it more of like a Kendrick Lamar strategy where it's like, I might only drop an album once every 4 years, but when I drop it, it's going to be so undeniable that everybody's going to be into it. I think just kind of approaching things that way at that level, like really being very tough on your taste and what you're putting out there, how you're communicating it, the timing and what it does for whatever bottom line that you're trying to impact. And then it's like, if it's not good, one, it's going to get shared. But then like, I think, with paid social now, it's just so easy to buy your way into the conversation. I mean, look in the last like couple of years, how many marketing campaigns, like using like the Snoop and the Smokeless, whatever that was, that whole campaign where it's like, it's just really good thought, really good campaign, get the right person into it, the right story, the right setup, whatever. And I know like the CEO ended up stepping down because it wasn't successful. Maybe it didn't do sales and maybe it's a bad case study for the conversation we're having, but the virality of it, like what they did, which I'm sure wasn't a huge high-end production execution, like it did a good job. They probably just didn't do the best job executing on actually converting customers, orders, whatever that looks like. And maybe that's what the issue was. But yeah, just really at a high level, just like really compelling storytelling visuals. I think that's really where we're at right now. Like anything else is pretty secondary to that.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that Snoop thing because it's really interesting to me. I think one of the things that is probably what people don't understand is like it's very difficult to measure success in a lot of ways, right? Like, you can to your point, the CEO stepping down, that just meant that the company went into it measuring the success of that based on sales. But like I guarantee you, nobody's ever talked about that company more. I can't even remember the name of it. I feel like an idiot, but like nobody will ever talk about that company to that level again because it was such a like crazy moment. And like, that's an important part to me. That's an important part of like a broad strategy, right? It's like, I don't think we should be talking about, like life things and being like, yo, let's talk about like whatever your favorite albums are right now. And then like, be like, buy the album in the description. Like that stuff just never works, right? It's like, you want to feel like an actual connection with people in order to eventually tell them about what you're selling. Or you want to have like paid ads or specific posts that are like, hey, this is what we sell, buy the shit, it's hot kind of thing. But I think that's such a weird, like a perfect example, but a weird example of like how backwards and how just confused a lot of big companies are when it comes to content. Because if you and I were, working on that project and all that happened, like Snoop, No Smoke, all the stuff, every major outlet picked it up and was like, I mean, I think a lot of people probably thought there's no way this is real. There's something up. But like the 2-day wait period was like, I was looking on Twitter to see what happened, or X. I was looking to see what that thing was going to be, regardless of whether I was a potential customer or not. And to me, that's super successful. Like how else are you going to get me to pay attention to fire pits? Like it's not something I need in any way. Yeah,
absolutely. Same thing. Like I remember Googling like the day after, I was like, damn, I hope Snoop's okay. Does he have any like health issues that are coming out? Like what
exactly.
stopped him from smoking? And then they drop the campaign. You're like, oh shit, that's really good. That's really genius. And I think you hit it perfectly. It's like, what are your KPIs? How do you measure success in those moments? Like, yeah, ideally it's market product, customer sees it, they buy it. Like that's the goal. But also like when you have like a higher entry point product, like I don't know how much that costs. Let's say it was $200. Somebody might look at the campaign 17 times before they finally make the purchase because it's not, you know, the demand isn't like sneakers where it's like you either move on it right now or you don't get it, or it's like a $40 purchase, whatever. And you know, maybe good segue to like the Finish Line days. I think that's what was so unique about being over there is like, yeah, we knew we weren't going to beat some of these other companies in terms of sales, but it felt like from a cultural standpoint, we were partnering with the right people. Our content was doing the right things. Like you could feel it. Maybe it was a little bit too in our sneaker circle where a lot of folks were like, Finish Line's having a big moment and we needed to do a better job of advertising to the average consumer in Indiana who doesn't give a shit about, you know, rare kicks or anything like that. They just want the latest version of Air Max that's coming out every November. And, you know, you got to service both customers, but I felt like we really hit that tier of customer in a good way. And it was just like, yeah, everything we're doing is not going to convert $1,500 worth of sales from that customer over the course of the year, but they're going to talk about it. They're going to share it. They want to be a part of our community. And that was the huge success. And like, we're very fortunate that internally in the building, like our CEO, our boss, Paul, like everybody that was kind of attached to it, Mike, like everybody seemed very supportive of it.
Yeah, definitely, man. I mean, I was just talking to somebody about the, you know, like the Steph Curry stuff. So it's crazy how much like some of the Finish Line stuff will pop up from time to time just in conversation. And I mentioned to you the other day, like somebody made a post about the Air Max campaign that we did back then and like being a part of it. And not somebody that's like a big influencer. Obviously we worked with some guys that are pretty big now. But like just across the board, you know, we tried to cover all of our bases with who we partnered with to share their stories. And, you know, it always feels good when you kind of like have that like reminder, because you know, like we've done so many things and I don't remember most of the stuff I've done at this point. Like I don't have a very good memory. But one of the things that I was thinking about was, you know, like talking about Paul, he, you know, like he really kind of gave us the keys and like was like in a sense like that very. The first thing was like, for me, the biggest thing was that Under Armour, Steph Curry, like putting the court in the mall and, you know, doing a 3-point contest in the mall and doing like Google Hangouts doesn't even exist now, but like this was like a live stream and, you know, I think you were on remote kind of like helping people that were coming on remote because we were trying to get everybody involved across the US in different places. But man, it was like stressful because we didn't know what we were doing. And Paul was like, "Can you make this happen?" And I was like, "Yes, I can make this happen." I didn't know what the hell I was doing though. Like I was like, I went to Radio Shack like 4 times that morning, getting extension cables so like Jacques could take his little mic around. And like, you know, we figured it out and it was super dope. Like I look back on that and like, of course things have evolved and like, you know, the tool that we carry, I mean, we could live stream better from our phones right now than we could have 10 years ago. With all the money in the world even. But like, I look back at it so fondly because he gave us that, you know, Paul gave us the chance to like, I mean, you know, we could have been hanging ourselves, but like it worked out, you know, like it was great though. So yeah, man,
he doesn't get enough credit. He really did give us a lot of room to fail, to succeed, to do whatever we want. I mean, I'll take it even back a step further. When I first got hired on, you know, left Complex, went over there, and I think it was within 2 months, Paul had realized, like, all right, this guy really gets it, and he tried promoting me to the content manager. And so I had a boss at the time who I felt like didn't really believe in me a ton. And I just had this like chip on my shoulder of like, well, I'm going to prove her wrong. Like I'm going to be the most undeniable thing on our team. And so when Paul offered me the job, I was like, I want to get really good at this thing first before I ever go to something like that. And he's kind of like very surprised. And that's how you entered the conversation. I was like, well, I got somebody perfect for this, you know, for this job. He's like, all right. He's like, never had anybody talk themselves out of a promotion like that. And I was like, yeah, we need Nick though. Like, I mean, you were definitely like, you know, it was like a 2-man game at that point. Like you go back to the Complex days when we started working together that summer, like for 2 years, like whatever, year and a half, 2 years, whatever that was, like I felt uncomfortable doing anything without you. And like, that was such a big part of me learning, me growing, me getting my confidence was one, having you there, but then also Paul just giving us the space to do what we needed to do.
Yeah, man. I mean, I just was saying this the other day, but I really appreciate the opportunity to work with you because I feel like we balance each other out in such a beautiful way to, like the thing about content in general that I think people don't understand is like, there's just so many things that have to go right for things to work and to really be like high level with things. And that's everything from writing to producing to all of that stuff. But it's also just like the way you've got to deal with people. And I think like the best thing about the way we've been able to work together is like, it's kind of like a give and go, man. It's like sometimes like you'll know when to push and I'll have to back off. And sometimes I'll know when to push and you can back off. And I think that if anything, like my experience with you has helped me in every role that I've had since then. And even just like working with other folks in the, creator space that, you just get to learn how to navigate that behind the scenes stuff. And once you figure that out and find the right people around you to work on that stuff, then the output becomes easy, right? It's like, it's all the stuff behind the scenes that happens, that's like the back and forth. I remember one time, like you probably remember this too, cause I probably called you right after, but like you worked out of Indy and I was in Boulder, and I remember Nike was I don't remember which team. I think it was Nike running or something was in Boulder, and they basically were just like talking shit about the content that we produced. And I was pissed, man. I like got up and walked outside and was like, it's freezing cold in Boulder. And I'm like outside, just like trying to like let it go. But there was just stuff that was said that I felt very unprofessional, especially for people that work at Nike, who most of us hold all those people in high esteem, but I found out like after the fact, a couple days later, probably from Paul or from, I forget, I'm not sure who it was from, but basically the person that made the comments that was like kind of the leader on the Nike side at that time was previously fired by our VP at Finish Line. So like there was like obviously some shit there that they had never, handled and, been adults about or whatever. And she was just holding on to a bunch of stuff. But like, like I treat it like I would playing ball, like if you throw at my best hitter, I'm charging the mound with him, like I feel like that is just kind of a missing piece too. Like, I don't know if it's just me in like the last few jobs that I've had, but like when everybody's on the same page and we all feel like we're on the same team, like we go to bat for each other, like somebody has a bad day, we're sitting, in a cubicle or outside grabbing a coffee and like letting that person say what they need to say and like be that voice of reason for them, or just be that ear that they need to like let go of some of that stuff. And I feel like that is also like just an underrated part of creating content in a like group setting, right? Like obviously you don't have to do that when you're just, Twitter fingers and posting your own personal stuff to social, but it's definitely a lot of what I learned, working with you across both those roles and opportunities that we had. And obviously super thankful for you, even saying, like to Paul to like give me a call. Cause like, I would have never thought I would have moved to Boulder, even though I have family in Colorado. It was just like, it was such a cool opportunity for me. And that little town is like just a cool place to be when you're like the kind of like cool kid in the neighborhood almost, like there's a lot of businesses there now, but I felt like we were kind of young on the Finish Line side being there. Yeah.
No, I going back to like the whole, like the Nike thing, whatever. And just like you talking about us being all very aligned and supportive of each other. I think that was the best part. It was infectious. I remember when I first started, like our social media posts were basically in studio shots, like it just, and they weren't really edited or lighted or colored right or whatever. And it's like, we fixed things from that to, I feel like we were one of the first companies to like really give influencers kind of like the front space of like everything that we're doing, and then getting them paid on top of it, not paid with exposure. Like started off, it wasn't a lot of money, and I'm sure it was never enough money, but it was like, we made those battles, those fights, but then to like even take it to the next step with like the Nike thing is like, look, me, Nick, I know that this is going to go out in front of people and I don't know who's going to see it. And I'm not here to be, a jerk about it or anything like that. But also like, we were the ones that were like, well, kids don't wear their sneakers like this. All we're simply trying to do is market them into a way that resonates with them. And if I'm not mistaken, like one of Nike's like first lines in their marketing playbook is like, the whole intent of social media is meeting people at the intersection of where they already are. That's all we were trying to do, is like, look, we know how kids wear these shoes. I get it's a running shoe. I get you want to call it a technical runner, but a large portion of your consumers aren't going to wear this to run. They're going to wear this with joggers. They're going to wear this with a hoodie, whatever. Like, we don't need to put it in 3-inch inseam shorts and wool socks and the whole nine. And that's what like felt like the whole like conflict in the battle was. And eventually they came around. And like, is anybody ever going to say like what we did with influencers, how we styled marketing, like that we were the ones that kind of like really pushed that forward in the early 2010s? No. So I will. Like, it just, let's call it like it is. Man. And like, again, it was just so fortunate to have people in the building that were so supportive of the vision. Like, everybody really understood, like, for us to stand out, we had to be different. We couldn't just be like, thank you for the assets, let us repost it. Like, our job would have been so much easier and less stress-free if we would have just went with status quo and been like, cool, great assets in front of a colored background, with a guy running in the snow, whatever. Like, we just didn't do that. And I think that's what I absolutely loved about that. It was like 1 through 12 on that team. Like, everybody was like, yeah, we believe in this. Let's do this. Let's go with it. Like, I mean, like, everybody from Castro, Max, Pete, Evan, Jay, Caitlin, like, everybody just seemed so good about like really supporting what it was. And it was, I don't think I've ever been in an environment like that any other time. And last thing I'll say is like, I think the reason I remember being in the hallway of my apartment building, talking to you, like, kind of like not trying to convince you, but convince you. Like, I was like, I want you to do what's best for you. But I'm like, I think the reason you should come out here was we've been reporting on sneakers. I feel like now we can really influence like what it looks like out there for consumers. Like, instead of just being like, this is the new hot shit. Like, it's like, no, this is the new hot shit. Allowing our friends to tell those stories, giving them the opportunity to be at the forefront instead of, recapping everything that's already been done by the brands.
Yeah, man, it really was such a crazy experience, because I think like, I think Finish Line had a blog, but they hadn't really like, it was like outsourced, and it wasn't really flowing the way like it probably could have been, or to the extent that it could have been. And who knows, like, obviously there's all sorts of reasons why those things happen, but it was really cool to come in there and like, it took a little bit, but like to feel like everybody was on the same page, to feel like we were all like really like after the same out for the same goals. And I think, like, I mean, that was like 2012, 2013, and we were putting Nightwing and Foamer and Jacques in Finish Line on the posters, on the walls, like, dude, it's crazy to think that we were doing that back then.
Reminded that I had dinner with Brandon Walker on Sunday, B-Walk, who worked with us there, ended up going to Adidas, whatever. He showed me, like, when we first would do like our social reports, like, he would just write down in his little notebook, like, what their followings are or whatever. Rachel Demita, when she first started working with us, had less than 5,000 followers on Twitter and Instagram combined. And it's just like, it's crazy. Like, the amount of people that like, it feels kind of like Belichick's like coaching tree. Like, you kind of like look back at it and it's just so many people that are like absolutely murdering it, that, started off just doing what felt like some Mickey Mouse stuff for us. And it really evolved into something very cool.
Yeah, man. I think too, like the funnest part about that for me, like in terms of like why Finish Line was the perfect fit for it, was that we were kind of the underdog in like the mall stores. You know, like we had a little bit more of a run and gun mentality with it, and we also had like, we went after a broad group of people. We weren't just like, hey, buy the Jordans. Like Jordans were selling out at the time. You know, we didn't have to worry about that so much. But it just popped up in my like, you know, memory thing or whatever on my phone few weeks ago. The like Finish Line Run Club, the women's run club that we did down there in San Diego. Like the whole event was like, you know, like 7 or 8 girls that were just like, you know, at the time, like they were just starting out on their like creative journeys or influencer journeys, whatever you want to call it. But like a lot of them are like really successful now. And it was just so cool to be a part of something where, you know, we had that freedom to like not have to focus on, honestly, like if you think about it compared to Complex, like Complex were always focused on what numbers were driven. And I think that the Finish Line side of things, we kind of got to figure out how we drive revenue based on the stuff we're creating, and like gave us a much more balanced approach to content across the board by being able to work on those different, you know, categories and with different types of people and different locations even, and all of that stuff. It's pretty wild to think of how much it's evolved, because, you know, like I've worked for companies, you know, since then that are still not even, you know, like putting forth that kind of effort, you know, still thinking about, you know, like the just like simple, you know, nothing against it, but it's like those beauty shots of a sneaker. You know, we've seen all those shoes a dozen times by the time anybody takes great photos of them. And not to say that that's not a part of a strategy, but it definitely is a smaller piece of that strategy at this point than, you know, I think people maybe think that it should be. But how do you think of like content, not necessarily your personal content or whatever, but like, how do you think of the difference between like individual content, say a creator, versus like a brand? Because I think you're kind of in a really unique spot in the role that you're in now, and with your experience, that you've been a part of like shaping both of those things in different ways for, you know, a long time. What do you think about, or I guess what are the differences in the way that you would, if you were given guidance to somebody that's starting out, what are the different ways that you think about those two kind of aspects?
Well, I think like, you know, this even goes back to the whole Finish Line thing. It's kind of like a cheat code when it's you. Like you just get to lean into the authenticity of who you are, and you don't have the same kind of guardrails as you would if you are a brand. Like obviously, like, you know, you look at like Nike, Apple Playbook or whatever, like they have very specific ways of how they have to do things. But as you, who's at the intersection of what they do, you have so much more boundary that you can kind of step over, do what you want. So I think it's like, that's the key ingredient is like you, what makes you special? Like, what are you so passionate about? Like for me, like on my personal page, it's like just a lot of nostalgia. Like I'm a very nostalgic person. Like that's a big part of what my brand would be considered or whatever. So like, yeah, I just get to kind of have a good time with it, whatever. Like I'm not creating things the way other people are. Like I'm good just posting up like an old video of something that might take you down to a certain moment in time, something you may have forgot about. Obviously you're doing something similar with sneaker histories, or not even similar, like you're, you know, really leading the way when it comes to stuff like that at a much higher level. But I think that's what the, you know, the real bonus is on that individual side, is you just have a lot more that you can kind of like reinvent yourself with and do. And like, obviously you want to have it somewhat dialed in. Like you want some consistency so it doesn't feel like it's coming from somebody different every single time. But yeah, and that's where I'm at right now. And my role is helping advise, you know, 40 plus companies on what they're doing. It's like, I almost get to reinvent kind of like my personal injection and what they should be doing. You know, some brands align more with what I'm interested in. Some of them are more financial based, where it's like, you know, you don't have the same kind of like creative room that you can do things with. But I think the beauty is like, yeah, just being able to reinvent things over and over and do different things, try different things. And also just like when you meet these founders, what is their story? How did they get here? Like what is, you know, the blueprint of what was created there, and being able to take that and help folks tell their story. Like that'll never get old. I mean, the 80s, 90s, 2000, whatever, like that's going to be a skill set that's always going to be needed because folks are always going to need to be able to do it. And yeah, man, it's just such an interesting place to like get an opportunity to do that over and over versus like we saw it working with sneaker company, even though we're doing stuff for, Adidas, Nike, Under Armour, Puma, whatever. After you do it for like the same 5 or 6 brands over and over, it's like, you can only do it so often. You can only re-release the same shoes so often. Like it starts to feel a little bit oversaturated and just, I think the freshness that I always get to approach things with, I'm really, really fortunate for.
Yeah, that's a great point. Cause I think that, I think we get to, at least the way I think about that is like, I would rather, like if you're gathering my thoughts here, if we have like retro product that comes out on a regular basis, right? Puma suedes or something that is like kind of just your like always available, sometimes it goes off the shelf for a while, but it's always coming back. Stan Smiths, Superstars, Air Force Ones, all that stuff. I think it's really like the cool thing for me looking at what you're doing now is getting to be a part of like those other people's stories. I think like if you and I were, we were still at Finish Line or still in like a footwear retailer or, or brand or whatever, yeah, there's only so many times that we can tell a story and still be excited about it. But one thing that I really always enjoy is like handing off that product or whatever it is to somebody who has a completely different angle on it. And that's something that I miss a lot lately. I mean, I just feel like, especially with sneakers, there's been a lot of regurgitated stuff, and that's not a shot at anybody. It's just the nature of the business over the last probably 5 years, 8 years, whatever it's been. And like, there's nuance to that in a sense that you have somebody who, like a Virgil Abloh, that comes along and completely flips their story enough to change the way everyone thinks about a product. But at the same time, like it's still the same product, like I know that it looks different, but it's still a Jordan 1. And I love that shoe, like I'm not knocking it in any way, but I'm also kind of wondering like, and what I want to be doing in the future is like handing that off and being in the corner of the next person that's going to be like, oh, this is the way I see the Jordan 1, like, I think like an example that comes to mind is I've worn Chucks obviously a long time, right? And I'm very basic. Like they're always, not always like fully laced up, but most of the time I'm always wearing high top Chucks. And most of the time they're completely tied just because those shoes slip around, the tongue falls down, they're kind of uncomfortable. And I'll never forget like Complex Con, probably 2018 or something. This dude was, and I've seen other people do it, but I don't know how people keep them on their feet. This dude had like his Chucks completely unlaced, like the way I would wear a pair of runners that are like snug fitting and like laces are completely undone and loose. And I was just like it's stuck in my mind because I saw it. But like, that's the difference. Like those little things about how you see fashion, music, sports, all those things, we're all consuming it and we're all taking it in, ingesting what's happening, and then we're putting out our version of it, whatever that looks like, whether that's being creative or, maybe you go crazy and you're doing collabs and all that stuff. And I wonder like how in your role now, how you get to, how you encourage people to do that. Cause I think there's a lot of people that have hesitation around it, right? Like, I mean, you and I have had these conversations over the years and worked with people where like maybe the confidence wasn't there, or maybe they were just looking for a reassurance or looking for, different ideas on the way that they could approach it. So how do you kind of, what are the words of advice for those people to like really kind of own up to their story, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's a little bit different, so I don't know if there's like a one size fits all kind of thing, but it's like you and I have done this long enough. We've got enough experience where it's like the people that we're collaborating with and co-signing, we have a lot of belief in them. And I think we're all human beings and we just get in our heads and it's easy to have a lot of self-doubt. And it's just, this is what I see in you. This is what I believe in you. This is what makes you stand out. And just simply just reminding people. It's like, I know he's not everybody's favorite person right now, but Kanye had this book, Thank You and You're Welcome. And there was like this, have you ever seen it before? It's like he gave it out at the Glow in the Dark tour, and it's literally like a kid's book almost. Like there's like 10 words on each page. And one of them's like the banister theory. And it's like, if you had to walk on like a single line of like, whatever wood, and it was 3 feet off the ground, you would never fall. But as soon as it's 50 feet up, you freak out, and then you're more likely to fall, kind of thing. And I think it's just giving people that mentality of like, we're all here with you. Like, make mistakes. If you're not taking those kind of risks, then you're not doing enough. And that's why we're with you, is because we know what you're capable of. So like, it's just like playing basketball. It's like, if you have a coach that's like, go play your game, you're going to fuck up sometimes. But if you do what you're supposed to do, we're going to have a better shot of winning this game. And I think it's just really giving people that mentality of like, you were chosen for a reason. Like, go out and do what you need to do.
Yeah, man, that's solid advice. I haven't seen that book in person. I've just seen pictures of it online.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's like $100 on Amazon now or something crazy like that. Like, you used to be able to buy it for like $20.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder like how, I wonder how people are going to like savor content down the road. 'Cause I think that's something that's really interesting too. Like, coming from the generation that grew up, like you said, Barnes and Noble. For me, it was Tower Records. Like, I spent like hours a week in Tower Records flipping through magazines. Like, that's all I wanted to do when I was a teenager, just like cars, sneakers, slam, like, I mean, just like Rolling Stone. Like, I was just like obsessed with magazines, because maybe it was because I didn't have the attention span for a book, or there wasn't enough visuals in it. But like, when you're like 17, 18 years old, like, that's all that really, like, you're kind of just trying to figure out like some guidance. And I think that's like an interesting, like, the next evolution of that is going to be really interesting, because we kind of have seen the like not falling off, but like just the slow deterioration of print. And like, I still absolutely love print. I still get magazines. I still pick up newspapers. But over the years, it's been like, Hypebeast, High Snobiety had their magazines kind of fallen off. Sneaker News had a print magazine for a while. I contributed to it a few times, and then it was gone. Complex has done, like, I remember going, when I was living in LA, I remember going over to Stussy on, La Brea, is it La Brea? Yeah, Stussy on La Brea there. Yeah. And they had the Fear of God, Jerry Lorenzo, like, Complex newspaper that was like super limited. And like, they just dropped it at a bunch of random places in New York and LA. And for me, like, I'm always after that kind of stuff just because it's tangible. It's like, I like the physical goods, like, that I can go back to and look at, because I think a lot of the stuff, kind of coming back to your advice on the, like, nobody cares if you make a mistake. Nobody cares. It's gone tomorrow. Like, yes, there might be some asshole that's like, oh, you had a typo, but like, hey, you got more engagement because you had a typo. Fuck it. Like,
yeah.
Like, wake up tomorrow and get back to it, And I think that's really interesting. But also, I could see where there's like a world where the next youngest generation that's consuming like sneaker content, hip hop content, that kind of stuff could even be like really into print magazines, because they just don't have that, it's easier to collect something like that comes out, 4 times a year or 12 times a year than to collect, shoes, but you still want to have those memories. So I could see that becoming a thing again in the future, where kind of the way vinyl has had a resurgence, like I remember like, I remember being at your spot and being like your little like newspaper thing. And I was just like, yo, that is like the sickest thing I've ever seen. And I've got like a couple different cool little ways of keeping my vinyl like on display and stuff. But like, every time I see some new stuff, I'm like, damn, like, I wish I could just have a room. Like, wouldn't it be dope to just have a listening room in your house where you're just like, all right, yes, I can put this on my Spotify and I can, walk around to it. But like, how dope is it to like actually have to take the time and put the record on and listen to it and wait for it to get through songs to get to that next song that you want to hear, you know?
See, maybe that's where I messed up. Maybe that should have been my background. Like, I'm going to kind of expose how messy my dining room table is right now, but it's like, got the vinyl player in the bar right there. And that's actually one of my favorite spots, is to just kind of like chill out there, listen to music, whatever. But taking it back to what you said about tangible, you're absolutely right. Like, I always think of how, like, when we're kids, like, that's when we have like our purest, like, most like instinctual like behaviors and thoughts. And it's like, I see my friends' kids when I go to their houses and visit them, whatever, they do the same shit we did. Even though they got iPads and they got laptops, tablets, whatever, endless media, they got pictures on the wall, like things that they've ripped out of somewhere. Maybe it wasn't a magazine like we used to, but whatever, they got the picture somewhere. And they got it plastered on the walls. Like, I think it's just like very normal for us to want to be able to touch and feel it. And like at my place in my living room, I still have all the complexes there. Like, they're stacked up, like everything basically from when I first started writing there until I want to say like 2014, 2015, like every issue's there. And there'll be times like we hired somebody on the content side that supports me, and like we're working on kind of like these like team picks, like where like once a month, like, you know, our founders like AJ and Austin, like what they're reading, what they're listening to, like what's inspiring them, whatever. It's like, yo, actually, like this kind of like gives me the vibe of like when Kanye did like his style breakdowns, like let's take elements of that, like elements from this Antenna magazine. I don't know if people remember that. Antenna was one of my favorites, like stylistically, you know, whatever. And it's like basically create a mood board. Like, you know, I'm sure a lot of people just go and find it on Pinterest or whatever. It's like, no, like I got the physical magazine. Like, I'm going to go straight to the source of like where a lot of this stuff came from. And like, I love being able to flip through it, because like, I think it was on the Newsroom, the Jeff Daniels show. He was talking about browsing through encyclopedias. He was talking to a therapist or something like that. And therapist is like, you know, that's what the internet's for. But he's like, but you have to know what you're looking for. And I think that's the beauty of having some of these tangible things, is like, if you don't know to go look for issue September 2012 to find something specific, how would you know where to find it? Like, that's why I love having some of this stuff, or Hoop magazines, old Slam magazines. Like, it's just source magazines. Like, if I'm ever fortunate enough to have a kid somewhere deep down the road, like I can't wait to show them all that stuff. Like, that's things that I guarantee they're going to appreciate a lot more than the 2D version of it on the internet.
100%, man. And I mean, Newsroom is one of my favorite shows ever, man. Like, it was just, I don't know if it just had to do with like us working in that kind of world for a little while, where like we really felt like we had to be on top of any news that came out, or if it's just, I mean, the show is great regardless, but definitely worth checking out if you haven't seen Newsroom with Jeff Daniels. I think it's on HBO or something like that. But it really is interesting to think about that, like, concept of having to know what you're looking for, right? Like, that's something that like completely bothers me about the way the internet works, because I like the exploration. You know, it's the curiosity for me that got me into sneakers, that got me digging through old catalogs with East Bay, you know, like, and I think that's really interesting too, because like same boat as you, like if I'm lucky enough to have a kid sometime down the line, what's going to be really cool is, and it might hurt a little bit at first, but it's going to be like me showing them, you know, I don't know, the Flight Go LWP, right? One of my favorite shoes of all time. But then they're going to open that catalog. They're going to look at that and be like, that's not the one I like. They like the whatever, the Air Up, the Gone, all those other shoes. Yeah. And like, that's the thing that
don't talk about the Air Up.
Internet,
that hurts,
you know?
That hurts my heart. Yeah. Speaking of retros that weren't done properly, but anyway, sorry, I'm going to cut you off.
Yeah, that was probably, I think that's probably the worst retro that's ever been made, because I bought that pair. It was so terrible. It was like the Vac Tech or whatever. I bought it. We were at Finish Line. I waited for it to go on sale. And then I got whatever the 20% employee discount or whatever it was. I paid like $30 for that shoe. I wore it like once, maybe twice, and it hurt my feet so bad. And I just don't understand how Nike has not made that shoe. It was so popular back in the day.
Yeah, man. the black and blue pair with the one on the back, like the player edition one. That was my mom. I don't know how she found those. Like my mom is incredible, the level of thoughtfulness that she'll go through. But she knew I was a big Penny fan. She saw them somewhere randomly, and she knew I had to have them. And it was like, I think that shoe is a more memorable moment than prom or anything like that to me. Like it just absolutely stands out as like one of the favorite things that's ever happened. Anyways, I didn't mean to take us off on the whole the hurt that we got for not getting a proper air up.
Yeah, it was good. I mean, it's funny too because it had that. It was that era where Nike started doing the like air up apostrophe 14, so that you knew that it was that year or whatever. It was kind of like the Air Force One '07 was not a thing until like 2011 or something like that, because they wanted you to know that you were getting that good 2007 like, you know, cut. But the 14 cut of the Air Up didn't cut it, man. That was
yeah,
whack.
Nobody. If it was like a bottle of wine that was like seasoned the wrong year or something, like nobody got it confused with anything premium. When you saw the 14, you're like, oh, I'm good. Like nobody was like, oh, these aren't the OGs. Like that was never a confusion on anybody's part.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, man. So what are some of your just like, what are the things that you think are most interesting going on in like the content social landscape right now? I asked that because like you kind of like encouraged me to go back down the Reddit rabbit hole, I guess. One thing that I always love about working with you is we could look at the same, like we could follow 90% the same people, but we both see completely different things. So for you, like when you're looking at like the current state of, you know, social and content and all that's out there, like what are some of the things that are really interesting to you and you're excited about in the future, for the future?
Yeah, this might be not the sexiest answer and very on brand with me, but the deep dives of the historical stuff. Like it's never been a better time. Like I love for this younger generation that they have people that are just spoon feeding them information about stuff that happened in the 80s and 90s versus like you talk about when we first started writing, like there was a lot of information out there. Like I don't think as writers we got enough credit of like, if you didn't remember this shit from 15 years ago, there wasn't really a good place for you to go and find it. So I love that about content. I love the community aspect of going on a YouTube video of a song and reading the top comments of like, this song takes me back to 95 when I first got my driver's license. And it's like, that's not me. I didn't have my license quite yet, but like, I feel you. Like, I get it. Like something about that connection of humanity through a lot of this, like the memories, the historical context. Like one of the weird deep dives I did last year was like, it feels a little taboo now with everything that's coming out, but like all the old Nickelodeon stuff, like the Snick stuff, like just like things that you're like, how could I have forgot like this commercial or this toy or whatever? Like that's probably my favorite part. Like there's a lot of things to be excited about with the future of content. Like I just even the quality of lenses, the different kind of photography, the way things are editing, transitions are getting sharper and sharper. Like it makes for a more creative experience. Like if I could live in a world that looked like a A$AP Rocky or Travis Scott music video, I love that part of the future of things. And I love the direction it's going in. But like, for me, it's just the deep dives, the historical part, the guys who can just do like a DJ set and put songs together that you never would have imagined. Like just, it feels like there's just like this endless possibility of knowledge and creativity on things that give you a sense of comfort because you already know them, but I'm getting a new version of it.
Yeah. Oh, 100% agree, man. I've been like thinking about ways to kind of try to, I don't want to get too deep into this because I don't want to give away the idea, but like kind of what you're saying, right? It's like letting like the next generation take the thing and their spin on it, right? And I think it's like really easy to find it in the YouTube comments of like music videos. A lot of the like, you know, like the deep, long interviews that happen now on social or on YouTube, you know, like I think that's one of my favorite things, like kind of like the, you know, like Jinx or somebody who's like going deep on like a topic where, you know, like instead of it just being like in podcast form, you're getting the video form of that. Right. And it just adds so much depth to something that I already enjoy, or like a subject on top of that, a subject matter that I enjoy. But then it's like, you've got other people on that are like also contributing to that are like slightly left or slightly right of the main, you know, person's point of view. And I think like, that's just like, I almost feel like we're like in a point where everything is slowing down, and like, I don't want to say it's like a reset, but it kind of feels in a sense like we're going through that process right now to be like, hey, it's been cool to see like, you know, don't get me wrong. I love like TikTok and Vine and all the short form stuff too. But like, it's been really cool to see even someone like, if you look at like, you know, most famous YouTubers out there, Mr. Beast of the world, their videos are 20 minutes long now versus like 8 minutes and 50 seconds or whatever that algorithm thing was, where it was like, I just spewed like 6,000 words in the first 30 seconds of talking to you. So you'll be so excited that you'll stick around for the rest of this. And like, it's actually like, oh, I actually just like this dude because he seems like a chill dude, instead of the chaos that we've been in over the last like 2, 3, 4 years, where like everything had to be so cut short. To your point about just in the visuals, the transitions, the, you know, ASAP Rocky type stuff, where it's like, all right, we're still like, there's still like a lot of stuff that's fast paced, but there's more intention and more thought process in the way that we get through those fast paced things to tell the bigger story in ways that I don't think I even really like recognized were happening as we were kind of moving towards it. So I'm 100% in agreement on that being like a really exciting new direction for things. I was going to say,
share my least favorite.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I share my least favorite thing on social?
Yeah,
dude, the like lip syncing videos. I can't stand it. Like there's nothing more cringe or painful for me than watching people not to the music and dancing, but more so like scenes from a TV show or movie, and it's like for example, like if I did one like to like The Godfather and I'm acting like a tough guy, like oh my gosh, dude, like I don't want the government to overextend itself to be shutting down social media platforms. But if they could shut down that genre of content, I'll vote for whoever in California can make that happen.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's pretty bad. I was actually going to ask you that made me think. So I don't know how much truth there is to this, but music wise, like you're way more well versed in the music side of things than I am. I saw probably on TikTok or Instagram something short that was basically like French Montana released like 10 different remixes to a song in order to kind of game the system to get credit for those like plays, because people will go and use his audio and make their own, whether it's lip syncing or whatever content they make, you know, like,
yeah.
I was like blown away that was like the strategy. Cause I'm like, why would you do that? Like the beauty in music back in the day, and, you know, putting my old man hat on, is like getting that to a DJ and letting the DJ do what they do and hearing it for the first time. This is going to sound maybe not as cool as people think I am. I don't know if anybody actually thinks I'm cool, but the song that pops into my head right now is there was an NSYNC song that was about like Friday night and just got paid or whatever. And they had a remix with like Bone Thugs and Harmony. And I was like, wait, is this a real thing? Like, I didn't know if it was real or not. It was on one of those like Friday or Saturday night mixes. I heard it and I was like,
Yeah.
This is mind blowing that somebody would put these two. Granted, now we would see that all the time, but this is like in the, like late 90s, early mid 90s, whatever. And that was like literally the DJ at the radio station did the whole thing. And I'm like, holy shit, this is mind blowing to me. That never happens if the person that's making the music is like, here's 12 versions that I had my guy in the back put together. So what, I don't know, fill me in on what actually happened and what you think about all that stuff.
I mean, I think you hit it perfectly. Like, they're just trying to game the system. Like, the art behind making music's changed significantly in the sense of like everything's so antiquated to how do I get as many streams as possible. Like, another version of it would be, 2 years ago, you started seeing sped up versions of all the songs simply so people could throw it on TikTok and they could take advantage of the streams, whatever. Like, look, the game's the game. Like, word to the wire. Like, you got to play whatever's going on in the battlefield. You kind of got to make adjustments for it. And that's just how music's going right now. Like, it's unfortunate that, to your point, there isn't a little bit more space for creatives to kind of do what they do. Like, blends, like that's, what you're talking about. Like, remember the one with like Tupac and DMX that was, everybody got it off of Napster back in like 99 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
I miss those kind of things. And yeah, I mean, I think like if you still have Sirius radio, there's still some DJs that do some stuff like that on certain channels, but then they can't put it on streaming because I'm sure there's label conflicts and stuff like that. Like, everything, I respect people taking care of their business and getting their money and looking out for themselves there. But also, like, when it comes to art, like, you got to give it a little bit of like space to like allow for life to just kind of happen. And not maybe in an AI sense. I don't necessarily love the idea of Jay-Z and Drake songs being created by computers. But like, if somebody naturally hears something and something else and they want to put it together and create something, like, that should be able to live on Spotify. Like, labels figure it out later. Like, if anything, chalk it up to that's just going to get more visibility to the artist, whatever. But I mean, back to your initial part, like, yeah, it's unfortunate. Like, everything's just gaming the system. Like, Migos are a perfect example. Like, Culture 2 or whatever, the Bad and Bougie album, amazing. Approach the album the right way, great album. All right, we did all this. Now we have so much pressure on us. It's going to cost a lot of money to create an album. Next album, we make it 25 tracks. 3 of them we know are good songs that are going to be played all over the place. The other 22 are just strictly to get our numbers up so we can, try and get more money off of this situation. It's just like, take it back to Nas, Illmatic. Give me 10 songs, make them the best 10 songs you can fucking do. And then go tour off the strength of that. Like, you're not making money off the streaming anyways. Who gives a shit? Like, at this point, it's a who's biggest contest. Like, whether you chart 1 or 17, that's really not doing a whole lot for your bottom line. It's being able to go out on tour, do as many shows, perform as much as possible, push the merch behind that, get the endorsement deals. I guess if you're a number one artist, McDonald's is more likely to give you your own chicken nugget. All right, that's great, but I don't think ultimately for your legacy it's doing as much as you want it to.
Yeah, that's a great point, man. Great point. Because those 17 tracks, you're not playing those when you're performing anyway, right? Like, you mailed those in. Right. Nobody wants to hear those. I mean, a few people might, but yeah. I mean, that's another whole conversation. Like, the brand deals that have been happening. I mean, some of them are like, you and I are kind of on the same page with the nostalgia thing, right? So like, Gatorade, Jordans, of course, like, there's as much as I know that this is just a big marketing thing, like, there's still some like tangible memories there that I can be like, okay, like, I get it. But then when you start seeing, like, to your point, McDonald's, right? McDonald's doing collabs with like all these people that they did over the past few years. It's kind of like, all right, like, is this really what it's about? Like, how much of this, where should the line be drawn between like a brand sponsoring an entertainer or an athlete or an influencer or whatever, and the collaboration? I'm air quotes for people listening, like, because there's clearly a huge difference between those two things, but like, if the person is big enough, then everything sells out anyway. So the measurement is always successful for whoever the partners are. But like from a cultural perspective, like, I mean, I love McDonald's, but like also fuck McDonald's. Like we shouldn't be eating that shit, you know, like
Yeah,
that's the hardest part for me.
Pretty sure if we say McDonald's one more time, we're going to get delisted for this podcast. Have their attorneys coming at us. No, I get you. I forget who said it. I feel like it was a skateboarder. I was reading an article maybe a couple of years ago, and basically like his whole thing was like, yeah, like having notoriety is great, authenticity is great, but fuck it, like most of us are doing this to get paid. Like I'm gonna sell out, like, and it just is what it is. And I think that's kind of like what we're aiming towards is like, as I get older, like as somebody like you knew me at like Finish Line, especially, like if it wasn't authentic, if it didn't match with culture, I was ready to set the building on fire and take anybody down with me, kind of thing. Like older I get, like, yeah, man, I think there's a beauty in even having the opportunity to sell out. So like take a Travis Scott, for example, like the king of collaborations, or a J Balvin. Yeah, a lot of them are super corny. Yeah, a lot of them don't really like fit really well with like what they're trying to do culturally. But, and you know, I'm not, a whole nother debate on how much money is enough money. I don't think these artists need to be 700 millionaires versus 70 millionaires, but who's it for me to say what's enough's enough? But that's a whole different topic. But yeah, like if you have the opportunity to have that generational wealth to where it's like, I'm not just taking care of me, my seed, my parents, like literally my cousin's cousin for the next 2 lives are going to be completely fine. Like take that McDonald's deal, whatever. I think let's call out the things that need to be called out, in the sense of like, that doesn't deserve awards. That doesn't deserve the notoriety. Like when we look back on it in 10 years, it's the guy who probably got paid less than $250,000 to do 2 colorways of his dream shoe with New Balance. And he saw the process from start to finish, where he picked out the colors, materials, created the whole marketing scheme, whatever. Like that's the stuff. And I just feel like the same way restaurants are graded for health reasons, like an A, B, C, whatever. I feel like marketing campaigns, like you should have clarity of like what the real connection was on this. You get a C if you just took a check and basically jumped in the commercial. You get an A if you saw it from A to Z.
Man, that would be super dope. I mean, I know there's all sorts of like marketing, you know, talking, like, I don't know, talking heads sounds bad, but like there's all sorts of platforms that discuss like strategy and campaigns and all that stuff. But that's definitely something I would love to see. I mean, like, you know, we have it with baseball cards, you know, like why can't we have it with, you know, like everything, right? Like there should be somebody doing that, to be honest. Like, honestly, there should probably be somebody doing that in the sneaker space too, so people can learn from some of the mistakes that are made. Shout out to the Air Up 14. It makes me wonder, like, you know, I'm 100% on the same page with you, and like, just, you know, get it while you can, you know, like I think that's a really interesting talking point that like almost never goes away. But the idea that somebody's selling out because they sell a business or sell, you know, like get a brand deal or something, it's like most of the people, okay, in my experience, nobody that's ever done what I want to do has ever talked down on me doing what I have to do to get by right now. And I think that's the way I think about all those deals. Like, I don't know people's financial situations, nor do I care to. But if it was right for them to do it in that moment, then so be it. I think my biggest gripe with those types of things, like Travis Scott Happy Meal or whatever it was called, that to me should have like a little bit more actual Travis Scott in it than just McDonald's rebranding the meal or whatever. That's my only thing. I think like if you're going to do it right. Do at least put enough effort into where people who are casual fans can be like, oh, cool, I'm actually going to go to McDonald's today, you know, like versus I'm not going to go line up to, you know, get the, if it's all sold out and stuff. But that's a whole other conversation. I mean, we've kind of moved into this. I mean, I've been away from StockX for a number of years now, but like it completely changed the way everything we look at in the resale side of things and how that drives things. And think like even like stuff like the Travis Scott McDonald stuff was being resold. You know, like I remember people like selling the uniforms or T-shirts or whatever that the employees got. And it's like going back to the point of like wanting something tangible. I hope that we're moving past the tangible thing that we want just being limited and unavailable. Cause like everything is eventually unavailable and sold out. Like it doesn't really matter. We all get caught up on hype sometimes, but I feel like that was a very like poignant moment in time to me to be like, wow, that's really selling out, you know, like,
yeah,
it's odd.
I think
it's really odd.
We all got caught up there, I think, for a little bit. I think one of the biggest learnings from it is there's always going to be another opportunity to basically throw away your hard-earned money on something that you don't need without having to pay 4x to get it kind of thing. But also, like, especially working in, you know, a fashion brand around a bunch of 25-year-olds, for them, I don't think hype drives them as much as it probably does like the sneaker community, but I think the sneaker community's gotten better. Like if you look at the resale of sneakers, like you've seen a pretty drastic drop. And for a lot of people, I think, you know, experiences, that's nothing new in the sense of like people appreciating experiences over tangible things. But I think we finally got into a much better balance with that. On the other side, like people are also willing to pay $2,000 for a garment, which that wasn't really a thing 10 years ago. Like I'll pay $750 for a Jordan, but I'm not paying $2,000 for a jacket. So I don't know. We always find ways to part ways with our hard earned money for reasons that don't really seem necessary.
Yeah, man, totally. You brought up the like experiences, right? Like that's kind of the last thing I kind of wanted to ask you about is like, in terms of, you know, we're kind of in an interesting place because we had like that handful of years where like COVID, we're not doing any of the in-person stuff. So all of the like, what I would say are like the big events, the big concerts, the big festivals, all that stuff kind of went into like a really deep lull. And a lot of that has come back, but with the news of like Complex and Network and all of that happening, and this like, you know, kind of like the sneaker con side of things seems to have like cooled off, doesn't have it, but there's a lot of like small local things happening. How do you think like the marketing and content for like either in your world of startups or even just, you know, going at like let's say a Finish Line or someplace like that, how important is that in-person stuff? Because we used to always talk about driving people into the stores, into the malls to like be able to see the product in hand, because, you know, once you see it, it becomes more real and it becomes more appealing in most cases. But we're also in this place where like, you know, like outside of like big malls and like super popular, trendy, like high end places where they always have foot traffic, we're kind of seeing like a lot of the malls just dead. Like I saw a picture of on Threads the other day, and it's like one store left in, you know, a 70 store mall that like is about to shut down. So how important is that in person, and will there be more opportunities for it? Is it going to be like, we're going to have Complex Con? I mean, I know they just did Hong Kong, but like, are we going to just see that happen monthly? Is that just going to replace like the in-person? It's like, those are like content opportunities for a lot of the like just starting out type of creators out there. But like, absolutely. I don't know. It's a weird spot.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I know how it fixed like the mall situation, but I think one thing that we discussed when we were at Finish Line that never came to fruition was blanking on the name of what we were called the stores, but they were like kind of like our like flagship stores that were supposed to be more elevated. They had a name for it. But we wanted to treat it more like a lounge, like a true sneaker boutique where it was like there'd be couches there, there'd be something to do other than just go in and buy a shoe, like basically a place to hang out as well. And I think it all goes back to community. And I mention all that because I feel like if you give people a reason where they can have an easy easy place to hang out with common interests that intersect with each other, that's what a complex con does. But it's at a much higher level. It's a much more premium brand in general. But like, I mean, how many times have you went to Complex Con? Not because you necessarily cared about the booths or whatever, but it's like, I know I'm going to run into 30 friends that I haven't seen in a long time, or it's an opportunity to network with folks that I don't typically get to see, or maybe even see an artist, whether it's a musician or, Murakami, whatever. Like, you got to give them a reason to want to come. And if it's like, well, you have the opportunity to come drop $180 on a sneaker, like that's just not enough anymore. And that's the beauty of e-commerce. It's like, I know my shoe size. I can buy that online without ever having to get out of my chair or whatever. And I think stores got to keep that in mind. Like, I get it's an investment, but if you don't bring that experience to the store, like, long gone are the 600 locations, but can you do that in 75 locations and do it very, very well and make it a destination that when people from Rockford, Illinois are in Chicago, an hour and a half away, they're going to stop at the store because they wouldn't typically get to be around a lot of those like-minded people. Like when I lived in Indianapolis, one of me and my friends, Kevin Miles, like we used to go to every single hip hop show you could go to because they were very rare in Indianapolis. And it was like, we always felt like we were going to run into somebody that like nice kicks, dope hoodie, like whatever. And then it just starts a small conversation. Then next thing you know, 8 of you are going and grabbing food on a random Wednesday because y'all connected at a show. Like, you got to give opportunity to do that. And I think that's the beauty of like Complex is achieved so great, and that a lot of people can take a page from their book is they built this very passionate community who they want to get to know each other. They want to be around each other. And even if, man, I remember the first time I went to Complex Con, it's like, there was probably 250 people that if I had the courage and the time to stop and say what's up to them, I would have, just because there was something about them that like really stood out to me. And it's not common. Like here in LA, New York City, maybe a little bit more than other places, but like a lot of folks don't really have that opportunity. And that's such a valuable piece that, these businesses can leverage.
Yeah, man. 100% agree. I think that's a good spot to end on too, because I'm definitely in that same boat with, the first time you go to Complex Con, you're just like, yo, like people actually like look and dress and live this life that like, I don't know, like it's like kind of like internet culture come to life in a lot of ways. The best of it, not, like not the worst of it. I mean, obviously you get some weird stuff happen sometimes, but like it's something that I think too, like bringing it back to like that community conversation. I feel like Complex Con, even though it's massive at this point, it's still something that feels like a community. And I think you see that every time you see the photos, even if you don't make it, you see the content that comes out of it, and you just see how people like are just like, they're just enjoying life, doing cool shit and connecting with other people that are doing cool shit. And I think that's like such a powerful thing. But man, it's been super dope to catch up, to chat. I think we got to do this way more often for sure. But I guess like let everybody know where they can connect with you outside of listening to this here podcast.
Absolutely. Well, first thing I got to give a quick little shout out. I think it's so important to name drop the right folks when you do this. Speaking of Finish Line, we talked a lot about our time there. Shortly after you left, the Kim Nguyen, Chris Elliott, Rennick Bauman era, like obviously 3 of the best people I've ever worked with there as well. And then in terms of find me at Mr. Brando 3 on pretty much every platform. Sorry guys, I don't really have a handle on Reddit, so you can't stalk whatever's going on there. And then lastly, have a podcast with one of my best friends, Jason Spells, who's a sports host and reporter called What You Heard, which you can also find on every streaming platform. And if you want to listen to 2 friends yell at each other for 25 minutes about pretty much sports and anything culturally based and really wonder, are they friends after you listen for 25 minutes each week, come check it out.
Perfect. All right, man. Well, I love you. I appreciate you being on here, and thank you all for watching, listening, wherever you're taking this in. Make sure you link with Brandon. I'll have his stuff in the description below. Catch you next time. Peace.
Peace.